What's up, metalheads out there? It is I, the savior of metal, coming to you today with a very different video. And I thought it would only be fair of me to warn you right off the bat that this video has nothing to do with heavy metal music at all. It is not something I normally do on the channel. It is very unique and very special, and it's something that's very important for me. So if the YouTube algorithm gods don't want to boost this one as much as my other videos, so be it. Today is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the day when the Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy in World War II. And a few years ago, I became friends with a man named Jack Gutman. Jack is a World War II veteran. He was not only there on the beaches of Normandy 80 years ago, he was also in the Battle of Okinawa. Jack was a combat medic, and he was there on the beaches taking gunfire from the Nazis. On top of that crazy story, Jack Gutman is, in all honesty, the greatest human being I've ever met. And starting from the beaches of Normandy and carrying on for the rest of his life, Jack was a literal hero and a savior to many. Jack is a real hero, not only in the war, but throughout the rest of his life. He was dedicated to healing people and helping them see their worth. And apparently Rocket wants to make a quick cameo in the video. Jack has one of the craziest true stories I've ever come across. Not only is he a World War II veteran, but after the war, he became a very successful stand-up comedian. He did tours and big shows with prominent entertainers at the time. He did some work as an actor, as a businessman, but what he's done for a majority of his life is be a motivational speaker. He's spoken to countless war veterans and those experiencing trauma. Jack and I have been friends for a few years now. We would get together regularly and have breakfast at a diner, and he would share stories about not only his time in the war, but his time as a 20-year-old in America having survived World War II. He wrote his entire story down in a book titled One Veteran's Journey to Heal the Wounds of War, which you can find on Amazon if you're interested. I do recommend it. Jack and I have been good friends for a couple years now, and unfortunately, the last I've heard from him, he wasn't doing too well, and that was a little bit ago. I have not had an update since then. And ever since meeting him, I always knew it was important for me that people knew of him and knew of his story, and knew his impact on not only the world, but me and everyone that he's come across. His life was dedicated to showing everyone else how important they were, and entertaining them. You'll be surprised to learn how pretty funny a World War II veteran is. Jack was a successful comedian for a long time, and he tells some of his jokes throughout this interview. And I think some of them do still hold up. Jack, to me, truly feels like the last angel on a dying world, if you will. That's how I really always thought of it. His aurora, his energy, it's something that you don't really come across anymore. He was a really special kind of person. Even in his own time, I don't know if there were many like him. And especially now, he was a golden relic among people, really. I guess all I wanted to say here is Jack was a good man. Jack is a good man. I just want people to know who he is. Jack always showed me that there was good in the world, that good exists and is important, and it truly is one of the greatest honors of my entire life to be able to call him a friend. We did this interview about 2 years ago, before I even had this metal channel, and it was uploaded on an old channel I used to do, but I wanted to upload it here because there's more of an audience here, and this is what I use now. So like I said, this video is not metal at all. If that's not your thing, you're not interested, I totally understand. That's totally cool. And with all of that said, just remember history and honor those that came before you. And here's a story of surviving trauma with my good friend, World War II veteran Jack Gutman.
Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
So back when you were a child about to enlist, what was the inspiration or the feeling that made you want to participate in it?
Well, I was living in New York. I was around when Pearl Harbor was bombed and by the Japanese. And I was about 15 years of age, belonging to a gang. And our little gang was called the Panthers. And we had nice silver jackets with black lettering saying Panthers with our name, which was really very nice. And the way we got it is making through raffles and so forth at that time for a 10 cents or a quarter, you could get a chance to win a prize. And so we raised money that way. But we belonged to it, and we were shocked when the Japanese attacked, because we saw them as people just making jewelry boxes, and never thought of them of any power. And then especially what they did, because what they it was really pretty sad.
Yeah.
So there was nothing I can do there because I was only 15. But then when I got to be 17, I asked my father I wanted to join the Navy, because a lot of my buddies in the gang, we were a gang and we did stupid things and a lot of fun too. But we were patriotic then, very patriotic, and everyone wanted to get in there and fight the war. And especially when we were in with Germany, against Germany too. But anyway, what happened is that when I was 17 and a half, I finally talked my father in and said, well, Dad, I'll have food and a bed to sleep in if I join the Navy, and I can send you some of the money, because we had 9 children, and there were 6 boys, 3 girls in the family, and I was the 3rd oldest. And my brother, Ralph, he had already joined the Army. And so my father signed for me, and I was getting, as a sailor, I mean, a 3rd class rank, which is the lowest rank when you're in there, $50 a month. And I was sending 25 to my family, and I lived on the rest. So that's the way it was at that time, so things have changed a great deal. But
certainly.
our attitude was being patriotic, and we wanted to fight for our country.
So you could say the Pearl Harbor attack almost felt personal, even though you were very far away from the actual situation.
Yes, it was just more personal. There was not too much we can do, outside of wait till we got older enough. And a lot of people were that way, we did things like collecting, I think they were collecting things at that time and so forth, where they wanted to help the war effort. I mean, there were certain things that they needed, and people would make collections, and we would do whatever we could then. That was the best we could do until we became of age.
Yeah. Going into it, like when you enlisted and you first are going through training, did you have any concept of the scale of the war?
No, I was 17 and a half when I got into it. I went to boot camp, and they told us a lot of things that the things that could happen. You learn to shoot a rifle, and also you took tests and in your training to see where you were adapted for and what part of the service of the Navy, which we were taking. When I joined the Navy, for I was going to go for the 4-year deal. And as I was standing on line, there was another line next to it when we went down there. And that was for the duration of the war. So that could have been as long as the war went on, or the 4 years. Well, I finally jumped over to the duration of the war. And so I wound up joining the Navy then, which was good, because I was there 2.5 years. And 2.5 years, the war, most of it was action overseas and a couple of invasions. And we were going to invade Japan also. And when they dropped the bomb, we went in and occupied Sasebo, Japan, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
But But when we got into the service, that we took tests. I took tests, and I was going to be an aerial radio man, where you'd be in the tail of a plane shooting, and God would have known what would happen to me, but I qualified for that. But then all of a sudden, the Japanese were shooting corpsmen, which were medical men, because we wore a red stripe, red cross, and a big red cross on the helmet. And they figure, shoot the medical men, and it kills the morale. Well, over in Germany and the European war, the Geneva Conference kept that from happening, or they stayed with it. So it was a little bit different, but when it came to the invasions, there was no being able to pick up anything like that. So when they shot down, that was it. And Normandy proved that. So that was it. So I wound up being from aerial radio man to going to medical school in Bainbridge, Maryland. And we went through an accelerated, I think it was 9-month course, or 6 to 8 months, almost near 9, which was almost like no leave, 6 days of school. Sunday was off, but we had to study, and it was an accelerated course. They were giving you a year and a half medical training within a short period of time, because they wanted to get them out there. So it was pretty much that way, and very, very strict, very tough. But we did it, and then I was sent to England, where we went to different places, picked up supplies, and then we set up a big hospital in England. We had no idea what it was for. Normandy wasn't even in the picture that I could, or anyone would even think of it. We had no idea what it was, but it did turn out that this big hospital called Netley, Victoria, England, Netley, England. It was in the town of Netley, England, and Victoria Hospital was there, huge hospital that belonged to the English, and it was in disarray, and we had to clean it up for over 5 months because it was 3 stories long, and it's in my book, which is.
Oh, I have a copy of your book here too, actually.
Yeah, this one too. Yeah, I have it's in this book here that I wrote. That was afterwards, and it's called One Veteran's Journey to Heal the Wounds of War, and I talk about it there and so forth. But we wound up there, and it turned out the training that we were getting and getting this hospital ready turned out to be for the big battle of Normandy, which we found out. Well, there was a group of us in this huge medical group. It must have been a couple thousand of us for this hospital, doctors, nurses, corpsmen, technicians, and so forth. And we prepared strongly. And then about 500 or 50 of us, close to that, I couldn't remember all, but we were pulled out, I guess, by name or whatever it may be, to go off to a place for special training. It was near Southampton, and which is across the river from Netley, England. And we were gone through some special training for climbing down nets and ships, and we were swore to silence, and we were told, if you talk to anyone, even your buddies, you could be court-martialed or shot. Well,
Yeah.
I'm 18 years old then, or just getting close to it. And so we were, I just, we believed everything they said, and no one ever released me from that either. And so it turned out we became training how we land on the beaches, those LCV landing craft, and we were taught that, how to what to do when we go on the beach, how do we repair an arm, a broken arm, or taking care of wounds. In other words, total medical training
Yeah.
was done that way on a beach and so forth. So we knew something was coming up, but we couldn't say anything. Basically, what they they finally told us that when it came around Normandy, because we would go back to our base, and I couldn't say anything. But when we were told that you were just going to be, when we do something, you will be on the ship, they said, we've got to, you would be evacuating wounded, so you would just be going in a little bit afterwards, 2 or 3 hours after normal anything. That's what's on the ship. We found this out.
Mhm.
But anyway, just going back to England, where we were training, we got trained for that. And then on a few days before we wound up, we were in Southampton on a ship of an APA with other troops and huge group of convoys, and we were heading across the channel and we were on our way, and that's when we found out that as we got close, because we were going to make the invasion of Normandy. That's when we found out what it was. On the
Really?
5th.
You didn't find out until you were on the way to the beaches.
Yes.
Wow.
And the invasion was going to be on the 5th of June. But the waters were very, very rough. Weather was bad. So the generals, I guess, which we found out later, were going to have to make a decision whether they do it the next day or put it off completely or cancel it. So, because the 5th was canceled.
Mhm.
And that was kind of a bummer because you're getting all hepped up for something. You don't know what the heck is going to happen to you. I mean, we thought with all of the troops and ships and all, let me just quickly tell you, there were 5,000 different ships in that convoy. There was 11,000 planes of different sorts. There was 4,500 landing craft, and there was 150 troops, Canadian, English, and the United States. And we had Omaha and Utah Beach, and the Canada and all had like Juno, Gold, and the different other. There was 3 others, 5 beaches. Yeah. Anyway, when the next day, that night before, on the 5th, when it was kind of like the Navy was very nice about everything, and they were feeding the guys whatever they wanted, I guess, knowing that a lot of them would probably die or something. So a lot of these guys ate pie and ice cream and different things like that. And my stomach was not up for that, so I stayed away from it. But many of them rue the day they ever did that, because the waters were so rough. And when they went the next day, I mean, it was a sober time there on the ship, because some guys joked, some guys were just very quiet about the whole thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask what, like, kind of how everyone was feeling going into it.
Yeah, it was mixed. And just like, you see, Wyatt, there's a situation that happens, somebody's going to die, but each person thinks it's going to be the other person, not you.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude. I guess it's your survival mode, or you have to think that way. And so that's the way it was. So you're on pins and needles. You got the nervous laughter and everything else. It was mixed emotions all the way around. Well, the next morning, early, all of a sudden we hear, cannon fire from the ships go toward the beach. Now we're way out, maybe a couple of miles out in there. And I think with the Germans, when they saw that armada, with the planes, there was different planes and so forth. There was the beaches we were going to hit, we were set up to do, but which we found out earlier that we were going to be on Utah beach. And apparently with all the shooting and everything, which was a couple of 2-3 hours before we got ready we were coming down we came down the nets and we were bivouacking around. So you bivouac, which means you're going around a circle till they give you the signal to go in. And we figured with all the bombing and everything that was going on, because it was just a mess with that, and the planes going over, you could see the hundreds and hundreds of different type planes. And we figured there's nothing going to be alive on the beach. So it was going to be a cakewalk. That's what we thought.
Yeah, you're part of the kind of the cleanup crew.
Yeah. And we were going to be just the cleanup crew, the crew that comes in 2-3 hours later and just evacuate the wounded on stretchers and bring them back to England, so at our hospitals we could take care of them. And that's the attitude. So we figured it would be a cakewalk. But almost close to 3 hours after, when we came in, there was a changeover, because it wasn't going to be Utah. Apparently they saw the problems happening in Omaha Beach. And what's happened there was they had bunkers way up in the hills and they were entrenched, and they had cannon fire, machine guns. They had some machine guns that would shoot 150 bullets a minute.
Jeez.
And what happened when we practiced landing craft, on England and so forth, your landing craft comes up to the beach, the ramp comes down, you run off onto the beach, and you start digging into the sand or get cover wherever you can. That's the way you're taught. However, coming in to Normandy, when we came in, there were barriers up in the water.
I was always wondering how those got there.
Yeah, the Germans had set up barriers. They had set up poles with mines on them.
Oh.
And they would be shooting at those mines when the ships came close. And when they exploded, it could blow the ship away, the LCVP landing craft away, and kill a bunch of the guys anyway.
Yeah.
Well, what happened as we're coming in. They saw the barriers, and we saw where you couldn't go all the way up to the beach because of the barriers, and so they had wires, barbed wire on the beach and landmines. As I found out later, there was over 30,000 landmines in the beaches area.
When you were there.
Yeah, in Normandy. And they thought the Germans really all set that up. And that was, I think it was Rommel, whatever it was. But they said that got that idea. And so they figured the tanks would do it. But what happened, they developed a pad where they could put a tank on this big, looks like a rubber pad with a little motor or something. And it could float with the water, up to the beach. And then they can get off easier there. And then get rid of a lot of mines and help where the troops were landing. Well, that turned out badly because the water was so bad and rough that it flipped the tank over and the guys went down and drowned in the tanks and everything. It was just, I think only 1 or 2 tanks hit the beach and they got shot when they got down there. That's what I heard.
Wow.
But anyway, it was absolute hell. I mean,
yeah, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, what happened is this. When the planes were to come over and hit these bunkers, if they could have hit the bunkers with the thousands of bombs they dropped, then it would have rendered them useless and the troops would have had a better chance. However, when they were coming over, they radioed, they said, we cannot see the bunkers because of cloud cover. And what happened is that they said, when you think you're near the beach, count 3 and drop the bombs. Well, they dropped thousands of bombs and they landed 1 mile away from the bunkers. 1 mile.
Yeah.
And
so the attack was supposed to start with blowing up the bunkers, and that would have made it easier. But throwing them off, it was kind of a warning for the Nazis.
Yes, and it turned out when the guys came up to into the water, the troops, the first 7 waves that came in to make the landing, the soldiers and all that, the fighting force, when they came up, they had to walk in water up to their chests almost, and because they couldn't go all the way up to the beach. So as soon as that ramp went down, the Germans, since they didn't destroy the bunkers and could have got those machine guns was just knocking off people as soon as the ramp went down, killing so many people. I think we lost over 9,000 or more on the thing, guys. And some guys never got a shot off. And the big thing was, when we came in, we saw lots of bodies in the water floating there, Americans. And I wondered what were they doing floating out on the side? And later on, when I was taking care of one of the wounded, I asked the question to one guy, how come all those bodies are in the water? He says, when the ramps came down, what happened is that when the ramp came down, the machine guns started, or a lot of fire came down, and they were getting killed. So the guys jumped over the side with their packs on, which were over 50 pounds. Yeah. And if they couldn't get the pack off, they would drown, you see. And they did drown.
That's
so
horrible.
It was absolute hell.
Yeah, it's sad so many didn't even make it up to the beach, like you were saying, so many didn't even get a shot off. Um, how, I mean, I'm sure it's absolutely terrible, but what was that feeling like of going from believing it would basically be a cakewalk and be easy to all of a sudden there's bodies and bullets flying and now you're in real danger?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It was surreal, and I'll tell you uh, I was a scared 18-year-old kid.
I think I definitely didn't realize how young everybody was too, because I've known about World War II. I've read about the history, but I never had the concept of these were all 17, 18, 19-year-old kids.
Yeah, all these young men dying. And then the one thing, the picture Saving Private Ryan was a good depiction of the landing. The only thing they could not show, which I'm glad they didn't, because it was pretty horrible, is that the body parts of those that were blown up because of the mines and so forth, or whatever caused it, because you would see body parts laying around the beach and everything like that, or in the water, and you know that was a son, a father, young uncle, or someone that never ever would be going home again, and it was surreal. I mean, it put you into a mode of survival. I've just got to survive. So what you did is once we got on to the beach, and there was fire and everything like that, and so it was not as bad as earlier, but it was bad. And when I came across, which I say many times when I speak at different places, that I tell people, you've got to think of yourself as having some importance. And I didn't feel important then. I was just Jack Gutman, pharmacist mate, not pharmacist mate then, but corpsman first class at that time. And I said, corpsman. And then I said, and I did not feel important. However, when I got on that beach and I saw the first man that screamed to me, and I saw blood gushing from him, and he's yelling, "Doc, help me, help me." I became the most important man in that soldier's life at that time. And I tell people that because in your job, no matter what you do, whether it's civilian life or medical or whatever it may be, feel important, because when you feel important, you will do a better job. So I tell that to encourage them. And one of the main reasons is that we have people that were not in the military and have not gone through various things, but they've lost people through COVID, the death of a loved one way or another, and the jobs, so many things that they've gone through, and your friends and family are crying out to you saying, help me, help me. And you've got to be there to try to do whatever you can to make them feel better. And most of the time, it's just listen to what they got to say.
Yeah, I think that's really excellent. I'm always ever since I've met you, I've always been so inspired by this, yeah, this concept of you kind of don't know how every action was going to lead to. Like going back to Normandy and D-Day, I'm sure you didn't have the concept of this is kind of a no, this is a historical moment for the world that would the effects of what happened that day would alter history, and the effects that you played that day altered people's history with the lives that you saved. Um, so as you were saying, like right then, with gunfire flying overhead, you don't feel important, but you literally played an effective part in changing the world for the better, I would say.
Yes, but you know, it's interesting, Wyatt, that when I went back. I mean, when we finally evacuated the wounded, and we went back and took care of the wounded at our hospital in England. And then I got leave, and I thought it would be the end of it. I thought I got stateside duty, which I said before. However, the one thing that I've always felt is that I thought that would be just the end of it, but all of a sudden I wind up in Oceanside, California, training with the Marines in an outfit called the Beach Battalion, which was that we were training with them for the invasion of Okinawa. You see, and that was another thing that was big. But the one thing about the Normandy invasion was that you find out so much later how, to me, how God just took a miracle, because it looked really pretty bad at that time in Normandy, and we lost, I think it turned out well over 9,000 there. Okinawa, it turned out to be 14,000 men died there, because you also had the Kamakazi planes, and that was done in 1945. So that was another thing which I hadn't planned on, but what I wanted to say is this: when it came to Normandy 75 years later, when I was asked to go with 6 other guys who were there at the same time I was, at 18 or 17 or 19, whatever their age was, that they were either pilots or something. There were 6 or 7 other guys beside me. We were there to do a 12-day documentary to go to Normandy. Well, I had turned down Normandy a couple times because, I thought the French didn't care about our men dying, and I did not like the French then. But I'll tell you one thing: when I finally relented and I went, and my son was with me as my guardian, and I found the people in Normandy so wonderful, so loving and caring. I fell in love with the French people, and that's I still remember that, so, and I ran into so many people.
I was actually watching your documentary earlier of when you guys went back there. So I'll try to post. I'll try to post a link to this too. But this is the documentary where, on the 75th anniversary of Normandy, you went back, and I love the footage there when you're in the town with the French people and they're doing their celebrations and dressed in all the military gear and everything. It looked like I think you were saying it felt like when the Beatles came to America and they were being welcomed like that.
Yes, that was interesting because I was, because of my book and everything, my book has been on Amazon for 8 years already, and it was doing very well. And it turned out that I was on Martha McCallan's show on Fox, and a lot of radio shows, Ben Shapiro and so forth. And I became like a little celebrity. And Martha McCallan interviewed me here from New York to California. They did it by something like Zoom, like we're doing. And then she also came to Normandy when we were there to do the documentary, and she wanted to do another interview with me for 15 minutes at some museum they had there. So it was all set up. And on the way there, while they were escorting me there, crowds, I mean, everywhere we went, the guys, the other 6, 7 guys with me, and then especially the one I went to Martha McCallan's interview there in Normandy, people were lined up, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. They wanted to touch you, take pictures of you. You were like a rock star.
Yeah.
And I knew what it felt like a rock star, because, I mean, it was just overwhelming, but very touching and humbly. I was humbled, believe me.
That's amazing.
Great people.
Yeah, what was that feeling like of obviously your last experience there, D-Day, going back? Was it comforting? Did it like kind of relieve some like stress off your shoulders to see it like now when you went back?
Oh, yes. My whole attitude changed because number one, I had already gone through 3 years of therapy, because I had developed, which I didn't realize, I was getting flashbacks, and I was doing this. I went almost 66 years, which I found out later when I went to treatment finally. I had post-traumatic stress for 66 years from the war. And I was doing crazy things, medicating very heavily on alcohol, and doing the most bizarre things you could ever think of. And I couldn't understand why I was doing this. And then I found out when I went through 3 years of treatment, it was really something. And when I fortunately got a man who was a great therapist. His name was Dylan Bender, and he was a wonderful guy that helped me get through. When he put me through the first deal of Normandy, took me back. I was breaking down crying. It was very emotional. And what happened, he says, those are going to be like ice cube memories in your head. Pretty soon we'll melt that down, and then you won't have to worry about it. But you'll be able to talk about it. And then he said, I'll see you here next week. And I thought to myself, the heck you will. I'm not going to go through this anymore. You know, then I realized I've gone through 66 years of doing crazy things. I gave away money and things like that. It was crazy. And so then I needed help. And I found that out the hard way, that on Thanksgiving with my family, which was a whole new story. And that's all in my book. Is that I was, if you invited me to your house, I would not bring just a small bottle of wine. I would bring a gallon of wine or a magnum of champagne, because I didn't want to run out myself. And so I was drinking pretty heavy on Thanksgiving with my family. And when they brought the dinner and I sat down at the table, my face fell into the plate and just passed out. And it was the most embarrassing thing I could have ever done.
And that helped.
And that helped change me. Then I realized I needed help. And I went finally with the help of my daughter, Paula, who's also a therapist, but she got me into stopping the drinking, and then, which I did for 15 months, by the way. And
That's great.
And then all of a sudden, she got me into a program, and that led me into the veterans treatment for the 3 years with Dylan Bender, and just changed my life. Now, when I went back to Normandy for the documentary, it was an interesting thing happened. I was interviewed by 4 of the big stations in Germany, France, England, and the United States. And there was one other, I think it was Belgium, I'm not sure, maybe 5. And I was on the VIP center over Omaha Beach, where they used to have the bunkers and everything there. And then all of a sudden, I was so tired after doing those interviews, and I was sitting there, my son brought me a sandwich and a cup of coffee. And a guy comes over to me. I just feel I have to tell the story. And he said to me, Mr. Gutman, he says, I read your book, and I deal with I deal with veterans. So would you be willing to do a 10-minute interview about PTSD? Well, I was so tired, I almost turned him down because I had gone through that day, and I was going to try to put him off. And then I figured, if it's veterans that are going through PTSD, I said, okay, I'll do the 10-minute deal. Well, he thanked me, got my card and everything, and I've dismissed it in my mind. 4 months later, I get a call from my office here, and he said, I'm coming into, because he was from Texas, and he says, I'm coming in to do some business in Orange County. I'd like to have lunch with you. So we met for lunch, and he told me that 10-minute interview that I did with him on a PTSD saved 6 men from committing suicide.
Wow.
And it just almost blew me away, and I almost turned that down. And that's then when I made up my mind that everywhere I speak, I just plead with people, don't kill yourself. I mean, I came to points of depression, but I never thought about committing suicide, but I know it could possibly happen. So I set goals in my business where I was working to excel. So I'd be so busy doing things that I didn't have to worry about being depressed. So I set goals and achieved them, and it helped me. I went into show business, became in sales. I became a manager of a thrifty drugstore, and I did it in half the time it took to do it because I set the goals. So it has to come out in your head. So I plead to people all over, don't commit suicide. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I said, look at me, and my life has changed because I went through that treatment. So I've just begged people to do it.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I've Sorry, it takes a minute to kind of gather all that. It's such a powerful, important thing to do too, because I know so many veterans go through that experience of getting out, and I think especially through everything you lived through both those invasions and just through all of this history of humanity you've experienced. I'm sure there were so many moments, especially during the war, where things felt dark and hopeless and maybe hard to uh, keep hold of light for the future. But here you are, you kept going through it and you had those goals for yourself, and you didn't even get to the therapy part of it until about 66 years, you said.
That's right.
Yes, so it's never too late to actually start finding other ways of getting better and improving your life.
Yes, I made up my mind, as I said, not only setting goals and excelling, but to touch lives and to pay attention to people. And I had quite a few experiences. I just want to give you one where I made up my mind that I would take time to, I learned one thing. I happen to be a talker, and I still talk, you know. Mm-hmm. However, I learned an interesting thing. God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. So I try now to listen more than I used to. And so there was a time where I was going through some financial things due to my post-traumatic stress disorder. And I had financially was down low. I mean, things were really bad. And so I applied to Walmart for a job, and I was 89 years of age then. See? And I said, and I was desperate. I didn't know if they would take me, but because of my background being a manager, and knowing merchandising and all of that, that they gave me a job. Well, I'm there as a cashier, and then I'm saying to myself, I found God, and then I said, God, what do you want me to do? I'm here. I feel I'm on the bottom of the totem pole. And he just impressed me with touched lives. Well, I said, well, this is kind of tough doing it here because you got so many people here in Walmart. Well, what I did finally was people would come through and I say, how's life going? And they say, it sucks and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I used to be that way. And then I found God and changed my whole life. And I was sincere. And they said, does it work? And I said, yep, it did for me. Well, there was a woman that came through one time, and she was there. There was nobody in back of her or anything, and she was pregnant. And she said to me, I said to her, same thing, how's life treating you? And she started pouring out her problems and everything she's going through. And I felt she needs to be talked to. So I said, I'm taking a break in about 4 minutes. If you would wait right there, I'll sit with you and we can talk. So she waited. I took my break and we spent 15 minutes talking and everything. I talked to her, prayed with her, and then she left. Well, then I injured my back at the job and I had to leave Walmart. And we worked out something. Everything turned out okay. But almost 9 months or a little over 9 months close to a year later, I was going to do a show. I do shows as a comedian. I was doing a show for this church, and it was an outside lawn, and people had chairs and all out there. People were all sitting there, and I was ready to go on in 15 minutes. And all of a sudden, I had no badge on, but all of a sudden I hear this voice saying, Jack. And I looked and I walked over, and there was this woman with a blue-eyed baby boy. And she's sitting there with a husband. And she was next to two of my best friends. And so they heard the whole thing. So she said, didn't you work at Walmart, near a year ago? And I said, yeah. She says, I'm that pregnant woman you talked to. You prayed with me and changed my life. And and her husband said, is this the Jack you keep talking about? She says, that's him. And he says, thank you for my wife. And I said, my pleasure. And all of a sudden she said, see this blue-eyed baby boy? I said, yeah. She says, I named him Jack after you. Wow. It blew me away,
That's so touching.
All of a sudden realizing that there was a person, of all the people I talked to, God brings this person to let me know you only have to do, it makes no difference whether it's one, they don't have to come to you. Just do your job, listen to people, and be available to them because they're crying out to you, yelling, help me.
It's interesting how that relates back to your time on the beach too, when that could be a moment where you probably don't feel that significant in yourself, but to that other person, you become the most important person in their life at that moment.
Right.
And it's so powerful. It's interesting that really stayed with you throughout your whole life, as like becoming a medic in World War II and then going through comedy, motivational speaking, and just taking the time to touch everyone's lives. That's really what struck me so quickly when I met you, was how you really take the time for every single person to let them know that they're being heard and being appreciated and they mean something. And that's really, I think, missing nowadays a lot. So many people kind of go through on their own set routines, or they're so busy running around. It's very rare and beautiful nowadays when someone does take the time to stop and have a human connection with somebody.
That's true. Very true. You know, there was one thing I just want to bring this up. While I was back in civilian life after the Navy, after World War II, I um, I had the ability. I had a good memory for jokes and things like that, and I found out afterwards the reason the jokes was my cover. You know, when I was going through therapy, I realized that I did humor to change the subject. I would not allow, if I saw a problem happen, I tell a joke or something like that. So it became like two people. However, when while I was going in the service, I did not have any big relationship with God, you know, and I wasn't really that interested at that time. I ran into a few people that touched my life on it, which helped. But I was in show business through my uncle because he happened to be visiting when I happened to be there. My father had me do a little routine or some jokes for him. And then he's a singer and his wife is a dancer. And they had lots of bookings. And he said, we could use a comedian and so work out a routine. So I wound up in show business with him. And at that time in show business, people were making $50 a week, you know. And at that time, $50 a week. My first paycheck in show business as a comedian with my uncle and all was $250 a week.
Wow.
And that was like mind blowing. Then I got 500 a week, then 750 a week, and I got 1,000 a couple of times. And then I thought I found out recently, what was that bit of 750 a week, which I had a lot, which was, what does that average out in today's market?
That's what I was wondering.
And it turned out that it was $9,600 a week.
Oh my God.
I was earning, you know.
That's
and
amazing. I was wondering, what was it like to see or to be part of comedy in that time when it was kind of a new art form that was emerging? Because that's when a lot of the really big kind of like Lenny Bruce and Pat Boone and people were coming around.
Oh yeah, well, as a matter of fact, when you mentioned Pat Boone, by the way, I worked with Pat Boone for a couple of times, and when I was in civilian life, we did a show at San Quentin Prison together with him and his family, and I did a show at the Circle South Theater, and so I still keep in touch with him occasionally. Nice guy. He lost his wife, but getting back to what you're saying, these various people, I've run into many different comedians and so forth, all various types. Some are very dirty, you know, and then there's others that are Kaleem was like not knowing him personally, but I got to meet Danny Thomas and so forth like that, and a lot of these comedians that were on what's his name when I got to know Danny Thomas's brother and all. The various comedians that were on that show, that Danny Thomas show, that I got to meet a lot of them. Comedians, whether in small clubs or whatever it is, was at that time was a lot different now. Today, it seems to be more politics with the comedy, and so it's a whole different. And then there were a lot of things you got away with at that time, like Archie Bunker's show. If you watch that, the things that were said there, you know, of various ethnic groups and all, you couldn't do that today.
Yeah.
And so, which is understandable, but as I say, you learn to just kind of go with the flow, and there's an old saying: if you don't like what they're saying, turn the knob off, and
Exactly.
and watch something else that'll please you. So that's basically, there's comedians that I just always love, the Myron Cohen, in the old days, Jack Benny and Jessel and all these different people. They had different styles. Don Rickles, I love him.
I was gonna, yeah, you told me about when Don Rickles was insulting you one time at a show.
Yes, in Las Vegas. Yeah, 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 he did, and he's very quick, and just happened to be. They brought me up and let me sit by the bar. That's when he was doing the bar shows, not the big shows, and but I've seen him 2 or 3 times, and very, very funny man, and but he had a very interesting thing. He would insult all kinds of people, ethnic groups or whatever it be. But when he finished this show, he said, my mother always said to me, never make fun of little people. And I know today and tonight, I have spoke to big people. I mean, big in their heart, big in their mind. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And they fell in love with him,
That's great.
You see? So there was guys who had great techniques, made a lot of money and so forth like that, but that's the way it works.
That's what I always loved about comedy, because I've spent a lot of time at comedy clubs, and there's so many different types of it too. Like, you can have 5 comedians on a show. They can all have an extremely different style of doing stand-up comedy, but it all counts as comedy, I guess. How do you feel that your experience in World War II carried into your time as a stand-up? Did you feel like you learned anything about yourself in that experience that you brought onto the stage, or that affected your comedy choices?
Yes. Well, number one, it got me to the point where I didn't feel inhibited. I've told people many times that give a guy that gets up on that stage, any guy, if he gets up, whether he gets up for a couple of minutes or an hour or longer or whatever it may be, give him credit for doing it, because you could take an audience of 100 people right there, and maybe 2 could get up on that stage and do that. The rest are all frightened about standing and talking in front of people. It's just one of those situations. So from the war, I guess with the camaraderie of my best buddies and friends, and then, there's a possibility that one of us may die in the next battle, or something may happen to them. And we get to the point where you try to build friendships and be strong. Well, when you come out from one thing to the other, when you get into comedy and all, you're making people laugh. And to me, that's one of these situations where you feel great. I've taken that person out of their problems right now for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever the time is. I've taken them out of their problems for a while, or they got something to remember, a joke or whatever it may be, so, and it touches my heart, and I feel good about it, that God has given me a gift where I can remember jokes and so forth. So people talk and they say things, and all of a sudden a joke pops in my head. I remember, Wyatt, when we were sitting and I was talking to you, and I was talking about the new Barbie dolls that come out.
Yeah, I wanted to give you the floor to tell a couple of your stand-up jokes, if you don't mind.
Well, there was But they got 2 new Barbie dolls out that came out this Christmas. One is called the welfare doll. The welfare doll, you wind it up and she won't work. That's the welfare doll. Then they have the new divorced Barbie doll. The divorced Barbie doll comes with Ken's house, his boat, his car, and his money. And that's the way it goes, you know. So, but one of my favorite jokes that I like is the guy that calls a hospital and he says, I'm suing the hospital and Dr. Brown. So they call Dr. Brown and says, what are you suing us for? And he says, you said you did surgery on my wife and she comes home after the surgery. She won't kiss me. She won't have anything to do with me. And the doctor says, what are you suing us for? All we did was correct her eyesight. Just that. But a lot of jokes come around. You know, it's like I see an old man or something like that, and I'll say, there was an old man walking in a mall with a beautiful blonde, and his doctor sees him and says, what are you doing? He says, I'm doing what you told me to do. He says, what did I tell you to do? He says, well, you told me to get a hot mama and be cheerful. Doctor says, get your hearing aid fixed. I says, you got a heart murmur. Be careful. So this is the way it goes, you know. So
Yeah.
But being able to do humor and do jokes and all, and people make a big mistake when they want to remember a joke. If you may say there was this French restaurant and the guy is in the restaurant made no difference. It's just you gave a setting, see, but they stay with the restaurant. And then when it comes to the punchline, they forgot the punchline. They say, oh my goodness, I forgot the punchline, you know.
There's sometimes where I'll have a friend will be like telling a story and trying to make it funny, and they're just going so much, it's kind of frustrating. And you're like, okay, can you just like get to cut the fat off the joke and just get there?
That's about right.
Yeah. Oh, you were telling me about hecklers and how you've had to deal with that with your comedy shows too. How would you approach that?
Well, you know, hecklers are there when you're in the nightclubs, and that used to happen a lot in the nightclubs when I first started. And so you have to find ways. Number one, what you do in the beginning when they start, you leave them alone. Don't bother with them because they can just continue to interrupt your show.
Yeah.
However, when you come to the a time where they're having a problem, it was like one time I had a woman she was drunk, and she kept interrupting me, you know, and I tried to avoid her, and then she kept saying things. So finally I just said to her, Madam, I says, I make my living this way, so please, would you not interrupt me? Do I go to your place where you work and take the red light out of the window? And she was quiet then, see, so or you have expressions like you saying, there's a bus leaving in 5 minutes, be under it.
Be under it.
Type of things. That's the way you do it. Again, you try to just get it to the point where leave them alone. Most cases, the audience sometimes will go along with you on that thing and say, throw them out or something like that. So, but hecklers, what you finally have to get in your head is that he's a guy who's feels that he's got a problem and he wants to try to be funny, so he gets attention, and so he sometimes make a fool of himself and so forth. So number one, you just have to take each one at a time and just either ignore them or give them one of these things and then leave it alone and all. So, but that's all part of it, and they can mess up your show if you let them get the best of you. Believe me.
Oh,
You
I'm
know?
sure. Yeah. And it also kind of just helps keep you sharp too if you can stay quick and adapt them into your set and turn it into more comedy.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, very true.
So, so you did comedy for a while. I know you did some acting too.
The acting, oh yes. Well,
Yeah.
I went to acting school for I think it was about almost 6 months or so, and you
Nice.
learn the little techniques. You know, they teach you uh, how to improvise. Um, what you do from acting is you're basically taking your regular personality and changing it into whatever character that happens to be, they have. I've played old man, played different characters, and you have to get into that mood. You have to kind of start believing that. And so, but it was very interesting. um, I remember once they had an improvisation thing where they brought a deal out a whole bunch of different things, and people just took objects, and then from that object they made uh, a joke or a story about it. And so when I got to take my item, there was nothing but there was a cork, a wine cork.
Yeah.
So I looked at that thing, and I figured, let's see what can I. So I told the story, and I told a story um, about when I was younger. I was telling them things about uh, how I never drank or anything like that, and then all of a sudden, I was invited to a party, and the guy gave me some sweet wine, and which was good, and then got me to try other wine, and I started drinking. And I was drinking heavy and so forth, and I was taking some things from my life, and going back and forth, and so I was talking about, and I says, and I look at this cork, and I says, and I remember losing this particular job that I'd wanted so badly, and I lost it because of drinking and blah blah blah, and I tears started coming down my cheeks, and the boss or the owner, I mean, that ran the studio, said to me, "That really happened to you, didn't it?" And I said, "No, I made up the whole thing." And he said, "Well, you sure as hell did a good job with it because I became that person." And so
Right.
acting is, if you're going to be something, actually do it. Like when I was I remember once when I was doing a play, and I was playing an old man, but a grouchy old man.
Hmm.
And I was back in the back before I was to go on. I had a little time. I was doing jokes and laughing, and this guy was listening to the jokes. Then he watched me when I got on the stage and became this grumpy old man and all. And he came and says, "How in the heck do you do it? I mean, you're back there making everyone laugh, and all of a sudden, here you are, that grumpy old man." And so I said, "Just think it. That's all."
Yeah. It's kind of doing all that work of building that in you ahead of time. And I like what you were saying about bringing in some of your personal experience into it and kind of combining it to go with the story. Because you can kind of
Yes,
trick yourself and you start bringing up real emotions for things that may have happened, but then you start like adapting it into how it plays into the script.
very. That's exactly it. Very good. Very good. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that story with the cork when you just went into that whole thing because that's such great acting, like in the moment.
Yeah. Right. That's true. But I'll tell you one thing. The one interesting thing that uh, going back to the war, from Normandy, Okinawa, then from Okinawa to where I got leave, and then we went back to, we were on the way with a huge armada of ships. It was almost like Normandy, and troops. We were heading to Japan. Sasebo was a naval base was where we were supposed to hit. That would have been my third invasion. And I would not have made that one because I'm almost sure on each side, because they said to us, after Truman said, drop the bomb, the second one, and then they surrendered, we thought it was over. But then we said, oh, we'll go back to Pearl Harbor. And they said, no, go into Sasebo. That's your base. So we were going into an inner harbor, and on each side was the hills with the gun emplacements and everything. We would have been like ducks in the water to go into that base. And I'm going to tell you something. We wound up occupying. Instead of fighting, they were waving their hands to us. And it was like a wonderful feeling to not be facing any fire. But that was about the thing. And so we were there for two months there, occupying Japan. Then finally we went back to the Pearl Harbor. And then from there, I found out they were ready to go back to, we were taking the troops back to where the big ships come in.
Midway?
No, not with Midway, over where I know the Princess cruises come out of it now. It was the naval base there at that time.
Okay.
We went there, and then I found out that I had 31 points. I had 33 points. And they said if you got 31 points, that, in other words, you got points being in action each month, you see. So I had 31, and they gave you so many points. And I saw I had from the bulletin, and we're ready to leave to go back to the Pacific the next day, you see. And I saw on the bulletin, if you got 33 or 31 points, you can be discharged because the war was over. And I went to the yeoman and I said, I got 33 points. So he told me what to do with it. And then I said, check it. So he did, found out I had 33 points, and he told the captain says, get his butt off the ship. We're leaving in the morning. So
Last second.
They gave me, my friends packed my bags. They helped me get into this little dinghy they had there. And we went into, I almost want to say the thing, but that'll come to right in California. And they didn't know what to do with my papers. They said, we got to get your papers ready. We'll give you a pass. They gave me some money, and they let me go to Los Angeles. Had a nice time there. The time when I came back for the next morning they had my papers ready. I was on a train, and this was December. I had already missed 2 Christmases, and this was going to be my third one. And on my birthday, which was December 19th.
That's my birthday too.
And your birthday, that's right.
We have the same birthday.
Right, December 19th. I wound up, I was home for my birthday, and I was home for my first Christmas in the third year already. You know,
that's great.
That's why I always say the song "I'll Be Home for Christmas" is one of my favorites. You know, so I enjoy it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That was quite an experience. I mean, just all of a sudden that happened, because once I go out to sea, I'm there for at least 2 or 3 months until they can get me transferred back.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a lucky thing that happened, but that kind of ended it. But you know, all the time that the post-traumatic stress was eating away at me, and I didn't know what was happening. We called it shell shock, you know.
Yeah.
And then it was like my daughter got me in my book where I wrote Oh, I didn't. When I had the transcripts, and she was going through a lot of it with me. Both my daughters and my niece helped edit it, and so they said. My daughter Paula said, "Why don't you talk about your post-traumatic stress?" And I says, I don't want to face that, you see. And so finally, so we discussed it, and finally I figured she was right. And it was very dramatic for me to go through it again about what it was. But basically what was happening to me was that my flashbacks with post-traumatic stress, my flashbacks were, I would see the invasion magnified. I mean, really magnified. The men screaming, all magnified. Blood gushing, all magnified. It was like a nightmare,
Yeah.
And it was just horrible. And and then I finally it would happen at different times, especially when you're sleeping at night, but it would happen in flashes. And also, so what I would do, I would medicate myself. And as I said, and I mentioned what happened, where I found it with medication and too much. But I just know God was just on me, working on my life. And I thank him. And I thank people like Dylan, my daughters, my family that stood behind me and kept me going.
I'm definitely thankful for them too, because of them, you were able to give this gift to everyone of helping inspire and motivate and really change people's lives. Like it's not an exaggeration to say that you really have saved people's lives in both in the war and through talking in your public events about PTSD and stress and everything. I think it's truly amazing, and I really want more people to know of your story and know more of just, I guess, your generous spirit, I would say, because meeting you do really inspire me to want to be a better person and try to help take the time for people and to have human moments, because I feel like that's so important and lacking nowadays.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for everything. I wanted to ask, what differences do you see between, I guess, time of your generation and generation now in terms of, I guess, morals or how people handle themselves? Are there things that you think have improved with time, and are there things that you think people need to hold on to from the past and learn from?
Well, but I look at the people of my time and so forth. I mean, we did crazy things also, just like young people do all the time. However, today's people, we got a lot of great people that are doing great things, these kids. And what we've done, unfortunately, is in news media, and with especially all the different types of news media we are bringing out too much of the junk that they're doing and not bringing out enough of the good things that they're doing. But one of the things that happens today, I run into it as and I never quite understood it. When we were young, we would take, when someone would either send us something or whatever it is, we would send a little note or a letter, thank them, just say thank you, regular mail, thank you, or a card, thank you for this, thank you for that, thank you for thinking of me, so forth. Today, just give you an example, there are a lot of people, which I get almost within each month, I always get 4 or 5 or 6 cards asking for an autograph or a picture or my book or something like that, or how would they be able to get my book? And I tell them, you can get it through Amazon, or if you write to me. And the book is only $10, you know, but I do it. I kept that book low so people could be touched and learned by it, you know. And so when I've done those things, they write very nice letters saying, I would like you to give me this autograph or what. And I send it to them with maybe something else extra. And out of, say, 100 people, 3 will write me and say, thank you.
Jeez.
The rest don't do it. It's on a normal basis. And my father used to have a saying, says, they got a handful of gimme and a mouthful of thanks, you know. So
That's a good saying.
And the key is they expect so many things, and they just take it for granted when they get it. You know, in other words, they want. Every so often, I get a wonderful letter from some people that appreciated what you did or the picture you sent or whatever it may be. I always try to do it because there are people who really care, you know, so that's the way it is. But people will be people, and really, you know, I think I would go crazy if I had to keep worrying about something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I've gotten to the point where I realize life is too short. Fortunately, I've hit 97 years of age, and I got this way because I made up my mind I was not going to let little things bother me. I used to have an old saying, don't sweat it out, you know, it's not worth it, you know. So it's true. So I have found, if you want happiness, give of your time, listen to people, and you will find that they will make, you will change their lives, or hope to change their lives, not preaching to them, but just by maybe your wisdom or whatever it may be, that if they make a change and their life becomes better, then you have touched the life. And it doesn't take a lot of money or anything like that, just time and being able to listen.
I think that's really beautiful. And like you're saying, it doesn't have to cost anything. It doesn't have to be some big, like, grandiose display. It can be just asking how someone's day is going, or telling them that things will be all right, or it's not, you know, end of the world. All those little things can mean something to somebody. And it's really impressive you've always held on to that. And it's really carried with you throughout your whole life, like I was saying, of being a medic and then going into comedy and motivational speaking, talking about therapy and PTSD. All of those things you could say are to benefit someone else rather than yourself.
Yes, that is so true. And all you do is, many times, your experience, a lot of people don't go through. People will say to you, my God, you've had very interesting life, you know. Well, a lot of it, you know, you weren't too happy with, you know, with what you did. I mean, all of a sudden I'm thinking of times where I made a lot of money, and then all of a sudden was at a time where all of a sudden I had $20 or $25 in the bank, and you know, and you learn many things, and then when things get better for you, like now things are going better. When I run into people where I can afford it, I help them. Where I can't, we just I will listen or try to do something else for them, you know. But like I kept saying, people always think every time you got to help somebody, you got to give money. Not necessarily. Give more of yourself, you know,
Right.
and you'll have it.
Right. I completely agree. I think that can be so much more important and meaningful to someone than just a monetary value of giving them real humanity and empathy, I think.
Right. Well, you know, you and I, we met because when you were doing the driving, you know, We met was it Uber or what was
Yeah,
it?
it was. I think I picked it from the hospital here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and we got to talking, and all of a sudden, I think it was the book, or you
Yeah,
read, and then the other things, and then all of a sudden, um, we exchanged numbers, and we've become friends over the
yeah,
years.
yeah.
And to me, it's been a wonderful thing because you're much younger. You know, what are you, 30 or something like that?
I'm
Whatever it is.
31 now.
Yeah. And here I am, 97, and all of a sudden, I mean, we look forward to having breakfast together and so forth.
Yeah,
And you've become a very good friend, and so it touches my heart, you know, just getting to know you, and it's been really wonderful. I mean, doing this little say, yeah, if you want a few minutes more, it's okay, because I guess what we've been, I don't know how long we've been on, but it doesn't make any difference when we get to going again, because it's going, you know. So.
yeah, we can get a lot covered. But no, that honestly, that really means so much to me. I don't take it lightly at all, and it's really an honor and so meaningful to be friends with you. And I really cherish hearing your stories and your perspective and your outlook on life. I think is just so important and can be helpful for people. And like it really does inspire me every time we talk and hear your conversations. And I'm just so fascinated to hear about how everything was. Like you were telling me the times you saw Elvis in Vegas and everything. And just I love the performer mindset of it too, because we relate very much in that way of how to be on stage and present yourself as a performer in many ways. I wanted to just make sure last few things I wanted to cover. Going back to Normandy and D-Day, um, how did the conflict on that day stop? Like, was there a period when it was clearly like over? Or
We were, well, by the time we hit the beach, you know, when we came in, you know, I mean, it had already been going on 2 or 3 hours already when we got to there, and then taking care of the wounded. I was on the beach for about 7 hours, you know, and with the with action and quiet, and then all of a sudden, I finally somehow they finally broke through, you know. So anyway, I don't know. Oh, that's my phone over there. Yeah,
okay.
my wife will pick that up. Oh yeah. Anyway, it was like I was on the beach, say 7 hours before we finally evacuated, and we were called to go with them right back to England, you know.
Okay.
So, but the time, let's see, I'm trying to think about the time there, the way they finally broke through. I don't know. See, so much action is going on, and it's, you know, and you are so busy, and you're in survival mode, you know, and you're seeing people die around you, and you know you see some very expensive. Like I said before, once I think you and I were talking, and I was telling you how this one guy got shot, and then he just said, he's sitting up talking to me, and he said, "Well, Doc, I made it, and I'm going to go home." And I said, "Yep, you will." And he goes, "Yep, I did the best I could for my country, and I'm going to go home." And I said, "Yep." And he died right there.
Jeez.
Crazy thing. I mean, there's so many different ways people die. But anyway, getting back to it, finally they broke through, and then all of a sudden the firing seemed to be more up there and not anymore down on the beach. Then they started to evacuate, you see.
Okay.
And that's what we got on it was the like the long deals where they could lay lots of stretchers out, you know, and lay the wounded on there so they can get 100 or so there, See, the LCVPs, the landing craft, only held like, 30, 40 people, But with the stretchers, they took on, so they used the tanks, or the one that were not the tanks, but the ones that carried the tanks, or vehicles, or the long things. I don't know. I think like LSTs. That's what I'm thinking about. Those type of things. It was the longer ship where we could do it. And unfortunately, some guys died on the way over, back to England. So that was it. But it was like a feeling from personal point of view, and I guess a lot of others. Well, we got through it. I made it, And then, of course, you used to wonder, you always wondered, why did my buddies die? Because there were a lot of guys on that ship that was there the night before that didn't make it, you see.
Yeah.
And so that's the feeling. It always happens the same way there in Okinawa and so forth. So, but thinking about Okinawa again, the Kamakazi planes was a very dramatic for me, because I'm now 19 years of age in Okinawa for that invasion, and my job is to heal people. And then what happens, all of a sudden the alarm went off for battle stations, and you see a bunch of planes coming in, and they got a bomb underneath it, and they're coming in low. And what they are was my first time seeing kamikaze planes. And those are young men, could be my age or even 16 or 17, whatever it is, that learn to fly one way, that is to fly and go right into a ship and blow themselves up with the bomb to destroy the ship or wherever they can. And I saw one come between my ship, the buoy, and the battleship New Mexico, which is like a little over two football fields away. It came in low, and then it veered, and I saw that you could see the guy with the stern face, and I thought it was going to go to our ship, but it veered into the battleship New Mexico and hit the bridge with a huge explosion. I was just stood there petrified. I couldn't understand what happened. And I found out later that one pilot with that plane and a bomb killed, I think, 60 to 80 sailors, including the captain of that ship, Battleship New Mexico. That's in my book also, picture of that. And I found it later, and then I put it in my book because I could not believe, because I saw it actually happen.
Yeah, you can see his actual face through the cockpit and everything.
Well, he came in low, just like a silhouette,
Yeah.
But it was stern. It was like a stern, just stern. No screaming, nothing. He came in low. I thought he would go to ours because he came closer to us. Then he veered right over toward the Battleship New Mexico, right into the bridge.
Jeez.
And it was and I just stood there and I went, wow, couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Really frightening.
Yeah, what's going through your mind then? Because as you were saying, you were there to help people, and here there's a young person who his entire purpose is to die during it.
That's right. And that's exactly what it was. So,
jeez. How did that battle end?
What, the battleship, Okinawa?
Yeah.
Oh, that was actually, we lost most of it. It was not like Normandy. It was little action on the beach, but not too much. It was all inside, with the caves and the hills up there. As a matter of fact, Hacksaw Ridge depicted it, and I was watching the movie Hacksaw Ridge, and when I saw the date there, I saw March 1945, and I went, oh my God, I was on the beach at that time.
Wow.
On Okinawa, I did not know anything about Hacksaw Ridge or what was going on. All I know is that we had so many wounded and bodies coming back down to that they had to get rid of, or bury or wounded, or take to our ships and everything. It was just, and we wound up losing 14,000 men, 63,000 wounded. That's how bad Okinawa was.
Those numbers are crazy. I was trying to think when you were describing the Armada going into Normandy, I was trying to picture just the amount of like steel that would be covering everything with the ships and the people.
Yeah, they had steel, and then they had wood and everything, and they had wooden poles and all that stuff too. Where
Yeah.
on the thing, and it was really something. And the documentary has some good pictures of actual pictures of where some of them came in, what they ran into, because a couple of the guys that spoke, one guy, I think he was bringing in the people he was
Mhm.
talking, but it's in the documentary.
Yeah, I was just watching it this morning actually, so I can think of exactly everything. Um, I wanted to ask about that. Having been in the war and these experiences, and then having done some acting and been in show business, what was it like to see these movies like Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw Ridge that like depicted events that you were there for?
They did an excellent job of depicting the battle and everything. Um, they do. I mean, of course, in the movies, of course, they have to dramatize certain things and all. So these guys will say things or do things that uh, I have to kind of shake my head and wonder. I don't know if I never heard anyone say that, or uh,
Yeah.
they don't joke. They're scared. I mean, guys on the that get wounded or getting ready for action. I mean, it's life or death for a lot of them, and it was. So as I say, that's what all of that comes to you later on, because it's all storing up in your mind while you're doing it, but uh, you're in a uh, trying to protect yourself plus the wounded, but whatever it is, you're trying to uh, you're trying to save yourself,
Yeah.
and it's and then later on when you're all alone, all of a sudden it starts coming back to you, and then things that you didn't think you got, it comes back to you, things you didn't want to see anymore, and that keeps coming back, and that's where I guess the post-traumatic stress starts, because it's traumatizing.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the most traumatizing events in world history, I think.
Yeah.
And to experience that so young too. I was trying to think of me at that age, like just crushing over girls, trying to get my first job or something. It was definitely nothing like the experience you had. Um, and it's so crazy to me because I grew up knowing about World War II history and like seeing Normandy and like movies and video games and stuff. And I knew how real it was and how significant it was. But then to talk with you and hear your experience of actually being there, it kind of paints a complete like other shade to it that it makes it more, I guess, real for me, I guess, in a way. It's now not just something that I knew had happened. It's something that I know affected someone personally in the events that unfolded there. It's really insane.
Well,
Um,
that impressed me about you. That, yeah, and I've ran into a couple of people like you that are war buffs, and they really get into it. That's when I give them a book or whatever it may be, so they get into more. Because the documentary thing is this guy named George Chiappa. he's the one that put out the documentary and brought us there. And he lives in Palm Springs. And by contacting his book where it says on the, if you want to get that documentary, you can get it straight from him, on that thing too. So,
awesome. Yeah. And I'll put a link to your book and a link to the documentary in the description for this so people can find it. I guess one more question I was thinking of. It's a very interesting time we're in now politically with things with like Russia and the Ukraine conflict, and then all kinds of crazy things. There's murmurs and some like fear from people about potential of another war erupting. I wanted to know if you have any thoughts on that, or if you have any thoughts on learning from or lessons we should learn from World War II carry into now. I guess your message for the present and the future.
Well, what I've constantly advocated, I don't get too much into politics especially with my family or anything, because we all have different feelings. But I'll tell you one thing: I do not want a young American to die in some other foreign country again. I would not want to see. I know we're spending a lot of money by giving them ammunition, everything which they need, but it's their country, and we have really nothing to gain from that, basically, that outside of not losing our men. So I would rather we give the arms that they need, as long as we can keep affording it, and people won't get. The one thing that bothers me is that here we keep having the inflation, and like to give you one example, I was at the store getting a dozen eggs. Used to get it for $3.50 a dozen. Now it was $7 and something a dozen, double the price.
Right.
And gas and all of this stuff. Well, the thing is this: if we can afford it, I mean, we giving arms to the Ukrainians. It's their battle, and God bless them. Then they're fighting to protect their country, which is they have to. But I don't want, seeing what I saw in World War II, so many men die, that I don't want to see a young kid or somebody die, which could be a nephew of mine or a very close friend, a kid, his son or whatever it may be, die unnecessarily. Now, if someone attacks our country, I would like to see all of these people go to and do what's best for their country to protect our country. But to just go there to what would some of these guys say, let's go over and kick their butts.
Yeah.
And I say to them, take your son and let him get in front of the line. Are you willing to do that? Oh, no. I mean, he's got an important job he's got to do and all. Well, I don't go for that. The thing is this: it's I don't want. If I could, let's put it this way: if I could we can avoid the United States going to war. We don't need another war. War is hell.
Right.
And people who have never gone through it just have no idea what it's like. Well, of course, the people in Ukraine now know because they're losing so many people because with the Russians and all. And so, but the thing is this: I don't want an American. I don't want boots on the ground. That's
absolutely.
It.
Yeah, absolutely.
Given the other thing, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think people who are usually the most war hawkish tend to be the ones who haven't experienced war firsthand. And then a lot of the times people who have experienced firsthand want every option to avoid further conflict.
Right.
Um,
but All right. Well, listen, before we go, I'll just leave you with one joke just so we can end on
Yeah.
a good note. I may have told you, but this is for your audience or people. There was a couple that were married. They were married 2 or 3 years. And then unfortunately, she got sick and was in the hospital. And a beautiful nurse was taking care of her. And unfortunately, she passes away and she goes to heaven. When she gets to heaven, St. Peter says, "Welcome to heaven." And she says, "Well, how do I get into heaven?" He says, "All you have to do is spell one word." She said, "What is that?" And he said, "Love." She says, "You mean Love?" He says, "Welcome into heaven." So she's there for 4 or 5 years. St. Peter comes to her and says, "I got to run a couple errands. Could you watch the gate for me?" So she says, "What's the password?" He says, "Oh, the password is always love. I mean, love will always be heaven's password to get in." And so she says, "Oh, okay." So he leaves, and 10 minutes later, she sees her husband coming along. She goes, "Oh my God, you died." He goes, "Yeah, what a bummer." She said, "What happened after I died?" And he said, "Well, you remember that beautiful nurse that took care of you?" I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Yep." And she said, "Well, I married her." She says, "Oh?" And he says, "I took her on a cruise." She says, "You took her on a cruise? You took me on a lousy weekend." And she said, "Well, she was some hot gal." And he says, "And then I bought her a house." She says, "A house? We lived in a lousy apartment." He said, "I know, but she was very special. I bought her jewelry and diamonds." She said, "You bought me this lousy ring." And he goes, "Well, I know it's just one of those things, but then this bum hits me and here I am. So how do I get into heaven?" He said, "Very simple. You got to spell one word." He said, "What's that word?" She said, "Spell Czechoslovakia."
Spell Czechoslovakia.
So hell hath no fury as a woman scorned.
Right.
But listen,
And
it has been wonderful talking with you, Wyatt. I'm looking forward to our next lunch together.
I am too.
And I'm glad we took this time. And anytime we want to do it again another time, we'll do it. So
Yeah.
I love you, and you have a great weekend, a good year this year.
I hope
You
so.
deserve it.
I appreciate that. We'll do my best, and I hope the same for you. Thank you
Okay.
so much for doing this. I know I had a lot of people who were really interested and wanted to hear about this, so I think you're going to inspire even more people with your story, and I look forward to that. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. God bless you.